Hey art nerds! Today we are going to unbox and swatch the Handmade Jazper Stardust basic set. Inside are 12 handmade watercolors, and I am so excited to share them with you guys today, so keep watching. A little note, these were purchased out of pocket thanks to the generosity of my wonderful art nerds on Patreon. If you like what I do and you want to help me do it, join me at patreon.com/natosoup. So you guys can check out the initial unboxing by clicking this card here, where I unwrap not only this tin, but my Jazper Stardust liquid watercolors and my Jazper Stardust passport. I thought it would be really cool to do a head-to-head-to-head comparison and then do multiple comparisons in case you guys are interested in handmade watercolors and you want to know what they're all about. For more information about these watercolors, including prices and links to where you can buy your own, you can check the description below. I am not affiliated with Jazper Stardust. All opinions are my own and are based on my experiences painting watercolor comics and reviewing watercolor art supplies here on this channel and over at natosoup.blogspot.com. So my basics set came in this small hand-stamped metal tin. It was originally taped shut. The tape has been cut. Inside are 12 little watercolor half pans individually wrapped with a swatch on them and the color name written on them as well. These are not magnetic watercolors, and if you guys are interested in some of my other handmade watercolor reviews, you can check out the cards here. I have reviewed Antithesis Arts, I've reviewed Hydrocolor, and I have reviewed Molly Marble's watercolors. If you are a watercolor manufacturer, if you make your own watercolors and would like for me to do a review and field test, please feel free to get in touch. So, since these watercolors have not been glued or magneted to the container, it looks like some packing foam has been cut to kind of take up the space. I do understand the necessity of that, but it also makes it a little bit difficult to pull them out for initial unwrapping and swatching. So I'm going to do my best to keep them in the order they arrived in. Also want to note, for those of you who are more familiar with machine-made or mass-produced watercolors, handmade watercolors do have several different properties that make them differ from mass-produced watercolors. In this 12 color set, we have Ox, Chestnut, Fox, Cort, Cobalt Blue, looks like Dark, Celestial, Cobalt Turquoise Lt, April, Aprel, April, Havana, Cobalt Green Earth, Buttercup, Venetian Red, and Indigo. I'm going to unwrap Fox Chestnut for you guys. It looks like you can just slide it right out of the wrapper, and then it has a piece of foil. Whoa! And it makes a little bit of a mess. Ooh. And this looks like the Meeden pans that plopped out. So you might want to use a little bit of gum Arabic just to kind of adhere your watercolors to the bottom of their pans. And the half pans are not labeled. So what I want to do with these is I want to tape them into this container. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make a color map to put in the lid. I'm going to put the color names on the bottom in the same order they would be on the top. And while that isn't necessarily the best way to handle it, I don't necessarily feel like I have better options. So I'm not going to actually write it on the half pan, which is somewhat unusual for me. Or maybe I will. Maybe I will change my mind. So one of my other art nerd friends, Kabocha, purchased the Jazper Stardust watercolors. I think they bought some of them open stock and bought Smalt as one of their colors. And one of Kabocha's big complaints is they felt like the Jazper Stardust watercolors maybe don't use enough gum arabic or binder. And kind of looking at these and the mess they're making on my tabletop, I feel like they have an excellent point there. Now, Kabocha was willing to remuddle their Smalt and add some additional gum arabic. I am not willing to do that. So we're going to see how these handle, and we're going to see if this flaking continues. But I definitely think it's something worth pointing out. And they are drier and a little more prone to flaking than almost all of the other handmade watercolors I've tried. Alright, so that is all 12 colors unwrapped. Some of the belly bands slipped off cleanly. Not all of them did. Some of them had to be snipped or peeled off. I like that the complete pan wasn't wrapped in foil. I'm not one for additional waste. I do not like how prone to chipping off and flaking these watercolors are already. That is kind of a new experience for me. I do like how full these are. You definitely get your money's worth of pigment, so that is definitely a plus. And I've also been warned that they can be prone to smearing, so that is another quality that I'm going to be looking out for when I do my tests. So the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to label these and prepare my little tin. So what I'm going to do, I decided I wanted to label my half pans after all. Now, since they're so prone to flaking, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to write the name on a little piece of tape. And put it on the side of the pan. See if I can get this up without it shredding. So we have Chestnut here. Doesn't quite fit. There we go. So generally handmade watercolor creators will label their pans themselves. I believe all of the other brands I've reviewed have, although I would have to double check that. And we will know for certain when I do that head-to-head comparison that I have coming up. And many of them include a small magnet on the bottom to help us place the pans in the container so they don't go sliding all over the place. So it's a little bit disappointing that Jazper Stardust does not. So I'm going to use a little piece of washi tape. I'm going to fold it over like so. I'm going to place it on the bottom of my pan. And I'm just going to, let's see, we have to get them 4 across. I believe they went this way. And I'm just going to stick them into the container. So I will finish doing that and get back to you guys. Okay, after much finagling, I finally have them all labeled and placed in the tin. And like I told you guys, I used some washi tape to adhere them and some Scotch tape to label them so you can see the labels there at the bottom. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put these back in, since these are so prone to flaking and chipping. I don't want that to happen. And I'm going to adhere the name labels to the back. And then what I would like to do is I'd like to use some packing tape just to kind of make that a little more water resistant. So while I've been handling the paints, it's given me kind of an opportunity to form an opinion. And so far I have some cons. So as we discussed, there's no magnets on the bottom, so they have to be taped into the tin. That's kind of a big one for me, because the tin doesn't exactly have like a clamping mechanism the way other watercolor tins often do. So it's either magnets or taping it in. Or I guess you could glue them in if you wanted to. The half pans are not labeled, and I had to label them myself. it did not come with a color map. Those of you who watched my Anthesis Arts Unbox and Swatch might remember that that did come with a color map. And the half pans are really dusty. Given that there are some cobalts in this selection, Cobalt Turquoise, Cobalt Blue Dark, this dustiness can be an inhalation issue, a toxicity issue. Handmade watercolors do not come with an MSDS to disclose toxic components, so I want you guys to use them with care. And if this is supposed to be a travel set of the basics, the presentation could definitely use some improvement, including a color map, magnets on the half pans, label the half pans, and adjust the mixture to be less cracking, flaking, falling out of the pan prone. Havana wanted to just fall out in my hand, and Ochre Chestnut was starting to fall apart as I unwrapped it. And I have a lot of paint dust on my table, which I'm a little bit concerned about because I do have pets and I have asthma problems myself. So inhaling something that could be toxic, like we don't know what's in Cort, for example, nor do we know what's in Celestial, but we do know we have 2 cobalts for sure. This much handling can start to be a little bit of an issue. I do worry for the owner of Jazper Stardust handling some possibly toxic materials. I hope you guys will forgive me the indulgence of lecturing you for a moment, but I want to point out that when you are making and selling handmade things, sometimes you have to put more care into them than the people who mass manufacture things. So as you guys know, I paint watercolor comics, I sell comics, I make mini comics, I sell mini comics, I paint original illustrations, I sell original illustrations. I sell a lot of handmade items at my table, and if I'm ever offering something that someone could buy in a store, they either expect me to offer it for much cheaper or at a much higher quality, or there has to be something about it that makes it special. So I apologize if I do seem sort of harsh. The suggestions that I'm making are coming from a good place. I am not affiliated in any way with Jazper Stardust, but I always want to see other creators succeed, and I know they get plenty of business, so my good word or my negative word may not hold much weight. But when you consider how many other people out there are making and selling handmade watercolors, a quick search on Etsy or a quick search on Instagram brings up dozens of results, and I have no intention of reviewing all of those different brands. I chose Jazper Stardust for a reason. But when you think about the fact that there are all these other brands out there available, competing for the same eyes, competing for the same dollars, you want to take the time to make sure that your product is at least of the same quality as those other handmade manufacturers. If you can't offer more, at least be comparable. And many of the other manufacturers label their half pans, have magnets on the bottom of their half pans, have custom fitted color maps. They put that handmade touch, and my Jazper Stardust package didn't really have that much of a handmade touch. This was the most handmade thing about it, and there's nothing else on it. And this is, I'm sure this was just to help organize the order, but there really wasn't a handmade touch to it. And when I send out orders to people, I include extras, I include stickers, sometimes I include charms, I write a note or I do a sketch, because I really appreciate that they chose to go with me, to spend their money on me, buying stuff from me to brighten or enlighten their own lives. So that's just kind of my own little nitpick. It would have been nice if magnets had been glued to the half pans. It doesn't take much time. I have a tutorial here on this channel on how to do that. I didn't want to do it myself because already I think these colors are very prone to cracking, and I'm afraid they're just going to fall out. In fact, if I ever travel with this, I will probably travel with these little inserts placed inside just to make sure they stay in place. Next up, art nerds, is for us to do our swatch test. Today I am swatching on the Langton Prestige 100% cotton watercolor paper. It's made by De La Rowney. And you guys will see that already I have some lines on this paper. This is just to help us test for opacity. And I actually put these on the paper yesterday. So we have our Jazper Stardust watercolors right here. And I'm going to go ahead and pre-activate them. Hopefully that will work since they seem to be quite dusty. Do you use these watercolors yourself? Do you use them in your regular watercolor illustrations, in your card making, in your lettering, in any sort of art or craft? Send me a link in the comments below. I would love to check out your work and love to get some ideas for future projects myself. Alright, so I will give those just a moment to soak in. Alright, they have had a chance to sink in. So I'm going to go ahead and start swatching. What I'm going to do is a gradiated swatch. I'm going to do a mass tone and then another mass tone. And this is going to help us see how opaque they are. This is going to see how they sediment out. Alright, so I finished the basic swatches, had to go clean out my cup of water, and I wanted to give my gradient swatches a chance to dry. I am finding that these colors pick up fairly well, so I'm not really having any delivery issues with any of the colors in this palette. They're very opaque colors though, and that is not necessarily conducive to how I work. I purchased the basic set because I thought it might function well as a good mixing set. It doesn't, I mean, I have not tested mixability yet. I could be wrong, but just kind of judging the properties of these paints, I don't necessarily think mixing is going to be my best result. We'll see though. There are some really beautiful opaque colors in this set. if you're looking for watercolors that handle a bit more like gouache and like to support small businesses, this could be a good avenue for you to go. I know a lot of the handmade watercolor artists focus more on the lettering crowd than they do on the art crowd, and I can understand that, just because the art crowd tends to be kind of broke. I am going to do, I kind of want to do a color wheel with these just to see if they would function, or perhaps do some blending or color mixes. Perhaps a chart. We have 12 colors, so that would be what, 144 squares to paint? Be quite an adventure. That one's still a little bit wet, but you guys can see how opaque some of these colors are, and I know that'll be even more apparent after they've had a chance to dry. So I will let them do just that. Okay, so our Jazper Stardust Basic set has had a chance to dry. I think you guys can see that most of these colors are fairly opaque. The next thing I'm going to do, oh, this one looks like it's separated out quite a bit. That's interesting. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a flyby so you can see these colors in action. And then I'm going to label them, try to figure out what pigments are used, and do a lift test. Okay friends, so I did a little bit of digging on the Jazper Stardust Etsy. I haven't done like a deep dive, I haven't checked wet canvas for example, but I found that there was no easily accessible pigment information available. This is somewhat concerning. So I wanted to share my experiences while swatching. Many of these colors are very opaque, which may not work well for artists who apply multiple layers, utilize glazes, or want to do color mixing. This is also an unusual selection of colors if this is a basics mixing set. This may be more of a Jazper Stardust sampler, but there really isn't any indication for the intended use in the description. The colors are very saturated and vibrant, so we have a lot of really lovely colors. If you're looking for very saturated colors, if you're the sort of artist who does 1 or 2 layers, this could be a really good set for you. We also have interesting sedimentation with Ochre, Chestnut, Cobalt Blue Dark, Celestial Violet, and Cobalt Green Earth. And as I'd mentioned earlier, pigment information is not available. This is a bit concerning as a reviewer and as an artist, as I would like to know what materials I'm dealing with and how toxic they are, especially since we have what looks like at least three cobalt-based watercolors in this set, and it really wouldn't surprise me if this super saturated Cort illion was either cadmium or cobalt based, but we don't know because this information is not disclosed, and that is important information if you're an artist, particularly if you're an artist with health concerns, asthma concerns, dealing in a workspace with poor ventilation, have animals, or have children. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons why you might want to know this information. Next, I am going to do the lift test, so I am going to use a slightly scrubbier synthetic brush. This is a Princeton Snap. I have a cup of clean water and a paper towel handy. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have a few concerns about this palette as a mixing palette. So I'm going to do something a little bit unusual, but kind of harkens back to when I used to do the mud tests, which nobody really watched, but they were very helpful for me. So I think there's still some validity in it. It's just not something I necessarily want to show you guys. So I'm going to do a little bit of color mixing in time-lapse on a fresh sheet of Langston Prestige watercolor paper. Alright, I have some thoughts on this set. So I've tried layering and some glazing, and I'm finding that the colors are very opaque, which could make for interesting layers, but they're also very prone to reactivation. So that's particularly true with, say, the indigo, and some of the browns started to really move a lot. I also found that glazing primaries, such as the red and the blue over the yellow and the blue over the red, and the yellow and the red over the blue, it's just not really what I would be looking for if I was looking at a mixing set. I also tried mixing some colors, as you guys saw on my Inkessentials craft sheet, and I get kind of muddy mixes, which is not, sometimes you want muddy mixes, like I'm not completely discouraging muddy mixes. However, I would not call this a basic set in that it's not a basics mixing set. So for somebody who mixes a lot of her own color, this is not necessarily a good set for me. Now, in my initial first layer test, I did get some really neat colors when I mixed, say, the yellow with the celestial violet, or the yellow with the very light, what is it, April green. So what I think I'm going to do, and this is not something I do often, is I'm going to make a big 144 square chart and see if I have any resulting mixes that I really like. And if that's the case, I will check in with you guys with that in one of my future Jazper Stardust reviews. I have a few more coming up, and I have a few more comparisons coming up. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of those, if those sound awesome to you and you're excited about it, I'm going to be doing a comparative handmade watercolor test where I compare this 12 color basic set against my Daniel Smith hand poured set, against the Antithesis Art Meadow set, against the Hydrocolor set, and against my Molly Marble set. And it's not necessarily a color comparison because none of those palettes really have the same colors. It's just sort of a comparison of the different watercolors. So I hope you guys will look forward to that. I also have an upcoming field test for this palette, and I would love to know what you guys want to see me paint with this little palette here. What are some things you would like to see? I'm a little bit stumped. This is a challenging palette for me, and I would love to hear your suggestions. So if you want to make sure you never miss one of my videos or one of my fantastic art streams, make sure you subscribe and click the bell notification because I have lots of watercolor wonder coming up in the near future. Don't forget, we still need to test the Jazper Stardust Passport set as well as the Jazper Stardust liquid watercolors. So if that sounds great to you, make sure you are subscribed. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today, helping me test these watercolors. If you like what I do and you want to help me continue, you can join the Art Nerd community over at patreon.com/natosoup and help me continue to do what I do, because the resources used to do these tests are kind of expensive, and my art nerds are the only sponsors that I have for this channel. So their support is immensely helpful for these sort of reviews. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you again with another Jazper Stardust review in the near future. Bye guys!